Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Tracking Studies Get Smarter, AI Meets Human Intelligence, as sponsored by Konovo and Day One Strategy. I'm Nicole Rowley, Pharma Forum's web editor, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Some words on housekeeping before we begin, though. If you have any questions, please do send them in using the Bright Talk function. They will be monitored and addressed time dependent at the end of the webinar. Additionally, we do have a couple of poll questions during the webinar, so please keep an eye and an ear out for those too. Otherwise, a Pharma Forum team member will be live posting key points of the discussion on Blue Sky throughout the webinar, and that can be found at pharmaforum.bsky.social. And the webinar will, of course, be available on demand afterwards, should you need to drop off the live feed this afternoon. And so to our main topic, healthcare is shifting rapidly, and market research tracking often struggles to keep up. So today we'll be exploring the challenges of traditional tracking, the need for change, and the role of technology and AI in shaping its future. To begin with, though, let me introduce our panel of experts. Mo Rice is Vice President of Global Quantitative Solutions at Konovo, and she will be providing quantitative expertise and insights on data quality optimization. Kelly Warth is Global Head of Data Strategy at Day One Strategy, and she will speak to strategic innovation and the AI-driven future of tracking. And Tamara Burke is Vice President of Global Qualitative Solutions at Konovo. She will provide a qualitative perspective and explain how to maintain depth at speed. To kick off the discussion, however, I want to ask you, our audience, a poll question. And that is, what is the most important question that tracking should answer today? And our probable answers for that question are: how is your brand performing against its set KPIs? Or how does the share for your brand look today, and how might that shift in the future? Or how is your brand equity evolving over time? Or what factors are driving changes in attitudes and perceptions? Or which levers will have the greatest impact on future behavior and brand growth? So while we wait for results to come in, I'll also ask our panel the first question of today's webinar, aligned with that poll question. So panelists, how should trackers be adding most value for global biopharma companies? Just some light answers to start with, while we give just a few seconds more to our audience.
Yeah, so I'll jump in there. I'll start straight away. I would say all of these are very important, and it's quite interesting to see how they evolve. And I would probably argue that E is one of the most important. So one of the big areas of criticism for tracking studies in the past has been their backward-looking nature. So making sure that we future-proof the tracking results to showcase what will have the best impact on future behavior and brand growth is really where we need to focus, and the rest kind of supports that as well.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, and from my point, whilst tracking is there to actually focus on your key performance indicators, this does need to adapt over the time to change with the market to enable you to quickly pivot to deal with any changes in the market, where traditional tracking has tended to just track the same KPIs, the same data points throughout years, rather than actually changing to market changes.
Thank you, Mo. Did you want to add anything, Tamara?
Yeah, I think from a qual perspective, speed to insights is important, absolutely. But also, I think as we're seeing a rise in that hybrid style of research that we're doing, the what needs the why. So we can no longer just be presenting what, we need to understand to help clients build their strategy. So what's driving these changes, what's driving behaviors. So having the why and having that qualitative element to tracking studies is really important, and we see that as an integral part of trackers moving forward.
Thank you. So if we return now to the poll results, we can actually see that the most important question, according to our audience, that tracking should answer today was a close call between how the brand is performing against its set KPIs and what factors are driving changes in attitudes and perceptions. So we all understand the value in tracking studies to help inform key decision making, but traditional trackers do come with their pros and their cons. And I therefore wanted to ask the audience first another poll question. It is the last poll question of today, but that poll question is, what do you think is the most frustrating aspect of traditional tracking studies? And the options are speed to insights, cost versus value of insights, understanding the why behind the what, as Tamara was saying, linking data and distilling insights that drive action, or consistency with other data sources. And again, we'll wait for a brief moment for results to come in. But while we do wait, I would like to ask the panel another question now, and that is to consider from your own experience, what are the key challenges with traditional tracking approaches? So I don't know if someone wants to provide their thoughts while we wait for some audience feedback here.
I'm happy to jump in and get started. I think traditional tracking studies, and just to clarify here, we're talking ATUs or performance tracking studies, they're kind of lacking the impact we want. We're not creating those linkages in those KPIs in terms of how they relate to your brand goals, your strategic imperatives, what it means in terms of prescribing behavior, not just today, but the prescribing behavior of the future. And what that also means in terms of business planning, whether it's investments, whether it's initiatives, and so forth. And we've gotten a bit in this trap of kind of drowning in data and not really having the insight we need to drive action. There was a phrase at a recent event I heard that was about being data rich, insight poor. And this is really where tracking studies have gotten a little bit lost. So we're not guiding the decisions we need to guide, and we're not giving the insight we need to give. We're also seeing, and I know Mo's going to talk about this, that we're getting into this trap of doing very, very long ATUs. So 45 minutes plus has become the norm. And what we're doing here is we're recycling questions over and over. So we've got long surveys that are not engaging for physicians, and we're also creating data quality issues on top. So we're asking these same metrics over and over without stopping to think, do they actually predict prescribing? Are they actually a good measure of performance? And are they consistent across your markets and within the waves of tracking? So really here, it's about speed with impact as well. What do I mean by that? I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call that have waited months for data from kickoff of an ATU to getting it at the end result. But it's not just about speed for speed's sake. Here, we want to make sure that we're giving you insights that are of high quality and faster, but actually have the impact on the business that they need to have. What's been happening is these long-winded, complex ATUs have been taking months to come to you and give you the insight you need. And particularly with new launch assets, we know that that first 12-month window is critical in terms of defining the market landscape and establishing your performance. So we need to make sure we get insights to you faster and data that actually drives insight and action.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yes, and to Kelly's point on that, what we are seeing is traditional tracking studies do take a long time, and field work alone can take a month. And if you think about changes, they happen overnight. So looking at the recent Eli Lilly 170% price rise on Monjaro, if you were tracking that and you'd started your tracking for that wave 2 months earlier, you'd still be waiting for that first wave of data's results, whilst the landscape is dramatically changing. And the length of interview is a big issue here, where we are looking at a lot of 40-minute studies, where they tend to be packed full of other metrics now, not just those key performance indicators. So as Kelly said, tracking has lost its way a little bit. So when you are looking at speed, you need shorter surveys. With those shorter surveys, also quality happens, because they aren't getting fatigued at 40 minutes and often dropping out. Looking at some data, once we're hitting that 40-minute mark, there's about a 30% dropout, which is very impactful to your data. Not only is it impactful because of the quality, obviously, the participants are getting fatigued and probably a bit frustrated, but these are often on tracking studies your target clients, because you're using your lists to target these clients, so you're not hearing from your most important customers. And this all in all just means that you can make better, faster decisions just by shortening your survey down and having it more focused. The sampling is becoming especially tough in things like rare diseases. So if you have a limited pool of respondents, yet you have a survey that's very long and arduous to participate in, you're losing that pool of very key respondents that you really need to be improving your design to keep them engaged. When you look at the fact that up to 75% of HCPs are now doing surveys on mobile, if the survey's design allows that, you can see what an impact these shorter, better designed surveys will have with getting you these fast quality insights. It's really important now to consider redesigning your trackers to ensure that they're future-proofed for the fact that most people use their mobile phone now to do much of their things in their life.
Yeah, absolutely, Mo. And also, there's this constant tension between speed and depth. So we know that clients want insights yesterday, but we're feeling that if you're rushing things, you're going to lose that richness of data. And respondent experience, let's be honest, these are the key stakeholders that we want to keep engaged. So I think the question for us is, do your teams talk to your fieldwork providers about what keeps engagement rates up, what keeps response rates high? Looking at dropout rates is really important. To Mo's point, we want to ensure that our industry is sustainable. So we want to make sure that we're listening to our respondents and to the key people that are helping us make these decisions. So I think, we've got to understand what the turn-ons and turn-offs are for HCPs, and respond to that and change things. We can't keep doing the same things and expecting a different outcome. We are at a stage where we have a lot of AI tools that we can use, and I think slowly we're seeing the industry embrace AI in a way that we didn't expect to happen so quickly. I mean, take us back a year ago and it looked completely different. There was a lot more hesitation. I'm really pleased, and I'm sure Kelly is from day one as well, that we're seeing that adoption and the embrace of AI to help enhance the outcomes for our clients. So yeah, there's a lot that's happening, but there's a lot that we need to work together on. So it's really working with our HCPs, the key people that we need to speak to encourage them to participate through creative ways and through making positive change.
Thank you, Tamara. And for our audience, the poll results are in, and apparently the most frustrating of the challenges is linking data and distilling insights that drive action. But interestingly, that yesterday, please, need for speed to insights came in last at 10%. But anyway, we move on with the discussion today focused on tracking studies. So I'm now going to ask the panel a third question. Where can you start with tackling these challenges today, and how can AI help elevate traditional tracking approaches? I don't know who wants to begin with that one. Perhaps you, Kelly.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. And I think it's a perfect follow on to the fact that linking data and distilling insights came in at number one. This is probably where tracking has fallen most short in the past. But some of the capabilities we've had to link data either within an ATU, across waves, across data sources. So not just about the ATU, but bringing in prescribing data, other secondary data sources, competitive intelligence. It's all been limited by the fact that we've relied on more traditional human-based interventions and curations of that data. Now, the important thing with AI is there's kind of two main roles, at least as we see it. It's first about automating those manual time-consuming tasks. what can we sort of take out of the hands of the researcher to free up time to think, to free up time to make sure we're critically evaluating the quality of everything we do. So we take those manual repetitive tasks out and we reassign them to different AI tools in different ways, which I can voice over in a minute. The other part about that is the smarter, fully integrated insights. This gives us more predictive analytics. This gives us more subtle pattern recognition that would have historically relied on correlations, drivers analysis, human observation, and it allows us to give that complete story. And it allows us to move away from sort of superficial linking of the story to actually saying, this is what we're seeing. These are the subtle patterns that are happening over data sources, over waves, over trackers. And it allows us to say, based on what we know now, what do we predict could also happen in the future? And what might that mean in terms of where you take your strategy next? So if we come on to sort of the automation of repetitive tasks, because the question is we want to be quite practical here, what sorts of things can we actually use AI for? And there's different tools in the market depending what you want to do and what your objective is. But we can automate, for example, the auditing of past wave research or pre-existing trackers. And we can have different AI agents or other AI tools tell us what matters most. If we're going to redesign and totally rethink our ATU, what are the metrics that have to live there? What are the metrics that have been consistently predictive of a good performance for you and your competitors? The things that must stay. What are the things we can let go of? What are the things that don't have any predictive power and we can leave behind? Or even what is duplicative of other things we have in sort of competitive intel or secondary data? We can use it to actually design questionnaire. We can bypass word questionnaires, believe it or not, nowadays, and actually go straight into auto programming and setup. We can use it for data cleaning, and there's some great tools with partners like Konovo or otherwise that automatically scan and identify where we might have poor quality sample before we get too far down the rabbit hole. And even open encoding, although there's a bit of room to improve on open encoding for those that have used the AI tools at the moment. We are also seeing tools that can help us chart in real time, more of your traditional sorts of charts, but still those things that used to rely on manual Excel tabs, then a chartist, then a QC checker, that can all be done in new AI-based platforms. So we're looking at days rather than months. And this isn't necessarily, it is about being agile and about being speedy. But as I mentioned right at the start, it's not about being fast just for fast's sake. It's about curating a more predictive, more integrated story that actually tells you how to drive action. So it's taking away that. We're also seeing a lot of custom-built AI tools as well, and we build some of those in-house at our organization. And what we're seeing here is that they might do different things. For example, either AI agents, as I mentioned already, where they can take on the role of virtual team members at different stages in the project, or we can build predictive analytic platforms as well. So whilst we use advanced analytics and always have with traditional trackers to look at usually drivers and maybe some other clever analytics, what we can do is, as I mentioned before, is build platforms that create this kind of data ecosystem, this one source of truth, and are able to recognize those subtle patterns in behavior and give you those early warning signals, or even give you archetype examples of what you could do. You've got asset A, we've seen this happen with asset B. Maybe think about this in terms of your planning, your resourcing, your tactics moving forward. The other thing to say as well, which I think I already covered off, is we've got some lovely little AI tools that can build real-time data dashboards. There used to be a bit of a manual process in getting those up and running, but now we're seeing great AI tools, again, through fieldwork partners and even externally, that can build, integrate, and even curate the narrative that sits there. And I would imagine in a future scenario, we might even be able to have these really exciting dashboards where I can log in as a marketer and see the insights that matter to me, as a medical person, see what matters to me as a market researcher, and we can curate these dashboards per stakeholder so they see what they need when they need it.
Thank you, Kelly. And this word curating seems to be key here. I particularly like curating a more predictive, integrated story. Before we go to Tamara and Mo, I did just want to remind the audience that we would love your questions to be sent in. So don't forget to send those in while you're listening to our panelists today. And so perhaps, Tamara, you'd like to continue with the role of AI here and tackling the challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. As Kelly said, we're talking about platforms and what's available now. I mean, platforms are getting smarter. We're seeing hybrid studies, which I've mentioned before, where qual and quant are being executed in one place. So we're losing this siloed approach to how we're collecting data, and seeing studies where we can tap into the instant, in the moment themes that are being pulled out. We're using AI to pick up on certain segments or on identify particular areas of interest that we want to dig in on. So, we can move away from those scheduled human moderated interviews and have those immediate AI bots and chatbots, working with the respondents to pull out the why to help make the decisions. I think whilst we're saying AI does speed up aspects of quant, we're also seeing things like transcriptions, translations, the quality of the platforms that are available at the moment, they're great. They're getting there, and where we'll be in a year's time, even 6 months' time, is in a really positive place in terms of the quality of translations and transcriptions via AI. Again, to Kelly's point, what used to take days now can take hours. We're using things like AI for sampling. When's the best time to get in touch with a respondent? And when do we know that they check their email? So all of these sort of little things internally that we can be doing as well to help move projects along, to encourage response rates, to ensure that we're getting engaging responses from our HCPs. Also, in terms of predictive analysis, looking at predictive health events such as hospital readmissions, the likelihood of adverse events, all of those sorts of things, by analysing patients' historical data, we're looking at a proactive and preventative healthcare model moving forward. So I think that's only positive, really.
Absolutely, I agree. And indeed, this sort of preventative care model is being much discussed lately. Mo, did you want to add anything here?
Yeah, as I keep saying, the survey design, that's very important here, because no matter how much AI you introduce to a survey or your analytics or reporting, the survey design is what's key on collecting good quality data. So we do need to keep evolving that survey design, and move away from some of the sort of endless grids and text boxes, and sort of gamify a little bit more, so you're engaging the respondent. And AI can be used for this. One of the things that we're currently doing is using co-pilots, looking at programming to help improve questionnaire design. So AI can be used in a multitude of ways just to improve what you're putting in front of an actual participant. When you look at things like 90% of HCPs are more willing to do surveys of 20 minutes and under, you can be using AI as well to help you streamline those surveys that you have, and really taking a good close look at what is really needed to collect to make the business decisions that you need to make. As I said, engagement is falling all the time as these surveys are much more repetitive. But as AI improves, it's also going to be able to pull out to you what the important data points are in making those business decisions that you need to make. And as AI gets smarter, it's going to understand your brands, what your key performance indicators are, and it's just going to help you redesign surveys to give you this real in-depth quality responses that you need to be able to think about what your strategy is going to be, because you've just had some data in that helps you make those decisions. And as Tam said, you can now weave in AI assistants that will probe on questions or maybe recontact respondents and ask them why they're answering in a certain way. But this is all done interactively and reported live. So at the back end as well, you are getting real-time reporting. So whilst your study's actually fielding, you can also be making changes if you need to find out that why on why a cohort of respondents are answering in a certain way. And I think as well, AI is really going to help with, if we're looking at modularization of surveys, where you are doing quick pulses, where you're chunking your studies out into much smaller sections and not trying to ask absolutely everything in one long survey. And you're actually mixing it up a bit, because, you know, this will also help engage participants more. Often we have to get previous wave completes, and this becomes harder and harder when you just keep asking the same questions quarter over quarter, where the engagement has just gone. So I think AI can really help actually look at how respondents are actually responding to your questions, and improve how you're actually asking those questions. AI is also a real game changer at the moment to help with checking data quality, also fraud detection, you know, spotting duplicate IDs, checking domains or browsers' reputations, and flagging speeders in real time. So this is constantly happening. So you can ensure that the data you're looking at in real time is valid and instant data, and that you haven't got poor quality data in there that needs to be removed at a point because someone's been straightlining. So I think AI is going to be absolutely key in the future of everything from the design, the reporting, and the insights of these tracking studies, and, you know, really updating them and refreshing them. And I think it will also help you get more from your research when you are looking at refreshing, making smaller modules. So your budgets will go a bit further in the end, because these long studies, they do cost a lot. They take a long time in field, and all the time, respondents are disengaging from market research because of this. So I think AI is going to teach us a lot about the behaviours of participants and what they are willing to do and when.
Thank you, Mo. So some great insights there, everyone. Thanks very much. So we can see that AI is a game changer indeed. But let's focus on tracking itself in comparison with other study types now. So my next question for the panel is, what is the value of tracking compared to other study types in terms of the depth and impact? I don't know who wants to take that first.
I can go. I'm pretty passionate actually about bringing back the love for tracking. I think it lost a bit of its love for a while there. And I think we allowed tracking to become lots of piecemeal pieces of information, and probably we even blurred the boundaries a little bit here in terms of just sneaking questions in just because we had the survey duration or we'd bought the right of entry to start that survey, which is reinforcing kind of what Mo said. But we all know that tracking and performance tracking, it is the backbone to your strategy. It is the way that senior leaders can look and tell their managers, how are we performing to the KPIs? And there's going to be a market share KPI in there for sure, probably an attitudinal or behavioral one as well. And it is that backbone to saying this was our brand plan or our asset plan. And did we actually get there? And on top of that, why did we get there or why didn't we get there? It is this powerful, amazing tool that when used with other methodologies in collaboration, like the Y-Qual element, like your competitive intel, like your secondary data, it can be incredibly, incredibly valuable. but we sort of got away from it. We are allowed to just look at these singular metrics, tell us sort of a basic story on your brand health funnel, maybe some market drivers and maybe some share. And we couldn't give that clear, cohesive story in the way that we needed to, particularly on the why things were going well or less well, if that was the case. And we did speak a lot about speed, and I do accept it didn't come through high up. But here, when we're talking about speed, it's about giving you, as I mentioned already, those signals to tell you what is happening and what should you do about it. Keep doing what you're doing. Course correct, because we've seen based on other data that you need to do A to get to B, which is where you want to go. And then ultimately, it's about talking about resource reallocation, maybe new educational efforts, maybe adjusting your comms or inspiring a new positioning or a new messaging. This is where tracking adds the value versus maybe being slightly, as I say, losing its value over time a little bit there. I did also say at the beginning, we know how important it is for that post-launch window to get it more regularly, to have the agility to make the changes that we need to make to get that initial uptake and adoption with your key customers. So that's really important. But also for your longer term assets, we still need to make sure they deliver and keep the business going as well. So continuous tracking is more possible now in an era of AI for all the reasons we've spoken about in terms of knowing when to contact physicians at the right time, how frequently, with what survey durations, through what channels, with what kinds of KPIs, because continuous tracking by nature of its design needs to be shorter, sharper, and run more often. So I think tracking is the backbone to everything we do, biasly as well, and as an important complement to all the other wonderful qual and quant projects we do as well, and all the secondary data.
Thank you, Kelly, for sharing your love of tracking. Mo, Tamara, did you want to add anything to what Kelly shared there?
Mo, do you have anything? I'm a qual girl at heart, so my love is with qual, and I'm firmly in the qual camp. I obviously recognise the importance of trackers and the work that Kelly does and our quant team does. But yeah, I think from a qual perspective, the why is more important now. Whilst I said it's great to have the data and to be tracking over time, I think as long as we understand the why. From a qual perspective, that's where I think we're definitely heading towards and making sure that we're moving towards that. But yeah, I'll let the quanties speak to the love for tracking.
We'll put you in a qual sandwich, Kelly, you and me. Yes, for the future of tracking, in any industry, you need to be tracking, and it's some of the largest work that goes on in any industry as well. But I do think now is exactly the time to be looking at what AI is out there, what changes you have to make. I know last year I saw a record amount of tracking work being cancelled because it was either termed as that was a nice to have tracker, or we're rediverting the funds to a newer brand. But as Kelly said, if you actually just take a look at the current trackers that you have in place on established brands, really you do still want to be tracking the KPIs on those. So if you do a review of all of your tracking work and see where you can improve and where you can still actually get the data you need to make any decisions that are relevant at that time in that brand's life cycle, I think you would just get a lot more from your data. In the future as well, I think it will very much be just shorter surveys in general. So it will mean using trackers just to track those KPIs rather than having all of the additional questions in there that maybe should be done in other studies. So, having PRFs in trackers, is there a real need for that to see your market share, or is there other ways you can do that? So I think it's a time at the moment for just reviewing everything you're currently doing. And I think as well, especially for pharmaceutical companies, is speaking to their internal stakeholders and asking them how much of that current data is used on a regular basis that it's reported. And then try to redesign your surveys in that well, looking at doing modules, looking at doing pulses, and just making it much more dynamic. And I think as well, you will get better engagement, as I've previously said. The core KPIs, sort of awareness and usage and perception, yes, they're all going to be here to stay, but then have a look at what else you can do, focusing on what's changed wave on wave. And pivoting out your questions to be able to do that. You can have voice activated assistants that sort of give you insights and will summarize recent changes on demand for you. So I just think, as I said, now is the time. With the generative AI models, you can also create personas, anonymize synthetic patient respondents and data. This is really useful when you're augmenting limited real-world data sets for rare diseases, and for training new algorithms, or for running simultaneous test hypotheses without compromising any patient privacy. Because the other thing that we do always have to consider, and is at the forefront of everything we do, is the ethical and compliance. So I think we're going to see a lot more AI frameworks, and they're going to be the norm. We can expect new governance around models to ensure transparency, privacy, and bias management in AI-driven insights. And I think pharma insights teams will partner with compliance and legal to create responsible insight automation frameworks. And this will become the norm. I think in even a year or two's time, we're all going to be sitting looking at the changes that we've seen in tracking, just like the changes we've seen in typical ad hoc research that have happened since in the last 12 to 18 months.
Thank you, Mo.
Can I just add something to what Mo was saying? We have said a lot shorter surveys, but I think here it's about being quite brave and letting go of tradition. And even at a very basic level, in screeners, we over-screen physicians on things that don't matter, particularly even when we're doing list recruitment, when we already know they're qualified as valuable to you in your business. A perfect example is we ask about time in clinical practice and workload. If they meet the minimum workload criteria, we need to have a good reason to be asking about time in clinical practice on top. Absolutely, maybe there is, but is it just habit and routine that kept us asking those same questions over and over? We tried to disguise sometimes the brand or therapy area. Can we streamline it to make it a more engaging experience for the physician? I did also see there were some questions here, so I don't know if you want me to jump in and ask them now, or if we want to save them.
I think we'll save some questions for the end. I did just want to, Mo took us nicely to my next question. Thank you for the segue, Mo. I wanted to ask you, Kelly, and you, Tamara, as well. If we look ahead, what will tracking look like in the next 3 to 5 years? And let's go with that ethic that Kelly just brought up, be brave and let go of tradition. Do you want to go with that bravery as well, Tamara?
Well, I think the quality in me is sad to let AI take over the moderation, number one. And I think all of the translators and transcribers in our industry would say, I'm sad that I'm out of a job or starting to lose my job. So there's a lot of change in the skill sets that we need as well. So I think what we'll see, and this is obviously my view on what we're going to see, it's an insights intelligence system. So as I've said, I think we're going to evolve from trackers just being quant to a bit of a hybrid system. So it'll be quant and qual with those AI moderation prompts, making sure that we're pulling out thematics and we're really probing where we need to probe to understand the why. I think that already now, and will become more important, is talking to your data. So Kelly mentioned each person with a different role within a company needs to have data that is relevant for them. So I think once these systems are set up to support your research, it will be about being able to talk to your data in the role and get the responses that you need to do your job and to make the decisions for your department and for your sort of key objectives. I think also AI will take Qual to another level with sentiment analysis, which it's already doing now. Video responses, these will become mainstream and almost just part of research as standard. I think also agentic AI models, so autonomous AI models that are making decisions independently of humans. How far we're off that, I'm not sure. It's always very scary when we talk about letting go. I think there'll be goal setting, they'll be taking actions to achieve objectives with minimal human interaction. So that's definitely the way that we're going. And researchers' roles will shift, I think, in a positive way. And just to second what Kelly said, it will be more focused on strategy, advising, reviewing the outcomes and working with pharma clients to make those decisions that are going to help support business strategy and decision making. So it's really doing what they do best, which is, problem solving and, taking clients to that next level. So yeah, definite change. Great for some, not great for others. But yeah, AI is definitely moving us very swiftly towards a different way of working.
Yes, as you say, evolving that role of the researcher from reporting numbers to interpreting meaning, storytelling, and guiding the action. Kelly, before we move on to our next question, did you want to add anything else here?
I mean, just one other thing to add to what Tamara said, because she summarized it so beautifully. I absolutely concede that, we're going to see this blurring of the qual and quant because the tools work. We haven't seen some of the AI tools in the past work as well as with numbers as they have with verbatim or text. They're only getting better and better as time goes on. But of course, we might also see a really true kind of curated research ecosystem being pushed to physicians in the way that pharma aspired to have omni-channel or multi-channel, depending what terminology they used, where the individual gets a curation of information that matters to them. I would imagine we see physicians getting, their kind of research channels coming to them of the bits that matter to them and where they sit with the business. So we'll have this really interesting ecosystem that keeps physicians engaged for all the reasons we've said, gives all of the what and the why, but makes sure that it's very focused and linking everything together into this ecosystem. We're seeing these words go around on LinkedIn from other agencies and from clients, this one source of truth, these data ecosystems. And I think we will see tracking start to be able to not just link information together, but actually give really true commercial insight and guidance in ways that we haven't seen before. Not just a recommendation, but literally be able to produce a creative brief or produce an actual output that is fit for purpose, direct to those commercial roles in the pharma clients.
Thank you, Kelly. So before we turn to questions, and thank you to the audience for sending in your questions, I just want to revisit the example that Mo brought up, which was the Mounjaro example, and apply what we've just been discussing. That's to say that Eli Lilly's Mounjaro had a 170% price increase that changed the market overnight. But if you'd had a tech-enabled, AI-powered tracking approach, my question is, what would have been different?
Yeah, so from my perspective, if you were doing continuous tracking, you might have started to see a shift in sentiment or a shift in change in attitudes and perceptions. If we had an insight ecosystem that was bringing together competitive intelligence, tracking, and other data sources, qual and quant, we also would have been able to get flagged on different changes in the media, different publications that came out. We would have been able to see what was happening and what changed. And then also, to Mo's point, we could run these quick sort of agile studies and get a quick understanding of what the sentiment is quantitatively, deploy an AI moderated qual and get these very quick answers to course correct as needed. Whatever that course correction is and whatever that needs to be in terms of the impact of the price change, would let the data tell us and the story tell us. But we would have been able to move very, very quickly on getting answers to these questions in just days and weeks rather than months when it's too late to act.
Thank you. Mo, Tamara, did you want to add anything here?
I would just add to that, a live dashboard would have updated the KPIs in real time as soon as that HCP sentiment had shifted. So it would have been spotted much quicker, which would have been allowed you, as Kelly said, enabled you to go in and deep dive on what was happening in the marketplace and pivot out of that survey that's still in field. And can't turn back. You're out there already collecting the data you have been collecting for the past 18 months or so.
Thank you. Yes, that real-time element has been very much focused on as being highly important in today's discussion. So we've reached the Q&A portion of today's webinar. And again, thank you for sending in your questions. So I'm going to go to one of the first questions, which has come in from IQVIA's Priyanka Shrivastava. Thank you for your question. And that question is, panelists, will AI help to predict a research approach for some research objective?
Do you want me to answer this, or would someone else rather answer?
You go for it, Kelly. We'll probably all say the same thing.
I feel like I went first every time. Yeah, I mean, yes is the short answer, but I think it can do even better than that. I think because it can synthesize and look at patterns and trends, not only can it predict effectively knowledge gaps, unanswered research questions, and therefore ideal methodologies based on past screening data, engagement rates, dropout rates, all of these lovely things that I'll let Mo and Tamara talk to, but it can also set an approach for a business objective and an unmet need. By the way, you need to revisit your positioning, and here's why. By the way, you need to relook at the educational program, and here's why. By the way, there's a biosimilar coming, which means X, Y, and Z for your current predicament. Here's what you need to look into. So I think, yes, it can absolutely predict a research approach and an ideal solution based on both past data and triangulated information. But I'll let Mo and Tamara jump in there.
I mean, I think the only thing I would add, and it's the same for all AI models, it's what you feed it and making sure that you're feeding the right information into the model to get out what you need it to get out. So it's really important to make sure that, you know, you're being very clear about what your objectives are, what the research is hoping to achieve, and that it has all the information to make those decisions for you. So yeah, absolutely.
I mean, to Tamara's point, sorry, Mo, I just wanted to add one quick thing, and then I'll let you go. Okay.
No, I have nothing more to add.
I think that's a really important point, actually, that maybe we didn't touch on as assertively as we could have, which is AI is there, but it has to be curated in the right way for the right objective for it to be successful. You know, as you feed it, as you train it, as you build it, that is really where its value comes into play. So at a very basic level, you can build AI tools or agents to tell you, a methodologist, for example, what's the best method now based on everything we know, but it has to be built and fed with the right information, refined. It has to have a human intervention to make sure it's coming up with sensible things. It's not hallucinating. It's not grabbing information from the wrong spot or interpreting it in the wrong way. So 100% these tools are going to really change the game, but they still will need the human curation to make sure the impact and the value and the quality is there.
Thank you. Yes, this point that artificial intelligence very much needs human intelligence still. So I also want to thank Lawrence Corrigan for a couple of questions. Lawrence comes from Savara. I'm going to go with your question, Lawrence. Are there examples of gold standard AI-centric technologies that the panelists would like to discuss?
I think we knew this one would come up. It's we discussed, because this is the question that everybody asks, you know, what are the best platforms to use? I think people have their favorites. I don't know if we want to promote specific platforms on this particular discussion. We're happy to talk with you offline. I don't know, Kelly, if you would like to add anything or name drop.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one. I'm not trying to be obtuse because we want to be like really practical here, but you're right. There's so many that we are still beta testing at the moment, or we have actually rolled out into the business at day one. And it depends what your definition of gold standard is and what your use case is, right? Because what I might consider gold standard for the objectives and the offer that day one has might look vastly different to what you need. 100% happy to have an offline conversation about different things, pros and cons, but there'd probably be another 1 hour webinar in itself about all the different tools that are out there today, but that are also coming, because we know with some of the tools that we've been testing that the evolution is constantly changing, right? So we know that, sorry, my iPad decided to start phoning, even though my phone was on silent. But just to say, there's a lot coming, there's a lot in the works, and there's a lot in beta testing, and we're part of that with some of the platforms that are available. So there's some I would consider gold standard, but whether my colleagues consider them gold standard outside of day one will be a separate discussion, as said.
Yeah, and I've sat on a number of demos with different clients, different companies, platforms, and I find each platform can do something better than another. So I think it's good for you to just have a look at what's out there, have these demos, because it really depends on your needs and the client's needs, what platform is going to be most suitable for those needs. So I would definitely say there is a lot out there now. There's constant new companies coming to market. One of the important things I think to consider when you are looking, and this is why I advise to get onto demos, is whether they are robust enough for healthcare. If you're looking, depending on what you're looking for, it's often good to use a platform that has already been working in the healthcare space.
I definitely agree with that with Mo. I think having experience in the healthcare space helps. It doesn't mean you should limit yourself to that, because there are some great consumer-led tools out there that have added a lot of value that we've looked at, that we're looking into. But there is a very nuanced specialism within healthcare. So we do need to test them and refine them to map against the very unique elements of biopharma and the different products we have in this space, and even including medical devices if this is an area you cover.
Thank you both. So I want to go to another question now. And again, thank you to Research Partnership Limited's Rebecca Davies, who sent in a few questions. But I want to go with the question that is, what platforms or resources would you recommend to help improve questionnaire design? For example, to gamify questionnaires or to minimize grids, etc.
This is probably a Mo and Tamara one.
Yeah.
Mo and Tamara one.
I will be slightly biased because we have an in-house co-pilot that we're using that is developing as well, which is being developed to help our clients be able to design sort of better questionnaires. There are a number of co-pilots out there. You have to be really careful with this when it's designing questionnaires to ensure that it's a closed model, that it's a paid for model, and that you're not just sort of trying to get ChatGPT to write a questionnaire for you because of the confidentiality around that. But there are more and more co-pilots happening, even, in Microsoft, etc. But as Tamara said, we aren't really recommending platforms to use, but there are a lot in development, including one that we're developing at the moment and is pretty far down the road.
And I think what we'd love to see from a fieldwork perspective is that clients are asking these questions, are pushing the boat out, and are saying, look, we want to be more creative with our trackers, or we want to be more creative with our research. What can you recommend? So unless we have those conversations, we're never going to make those changes. So it really comes from, you know, the research teams to be brave, to Kelly's point, and to take that step towards creativity, to be imaginative. And, you know, if you think about when you're testing a link, for example, if you're bored, then, you know, the respondents are going to be feeling that pain as well. So if we can, you know, help, you know, if your partners can help you make it more engaging, then we would, you know, obviously we would be more than happy to do that. But having those conversations rather than, as we've said, keep trotting out the same style of research every time, because, you know, there is a lot out there. We can work with you on that, and want to see an improvement in response rates and more quality data. So, you know, we all have the same goal, but we have to work together. It's definitely a partnership.
Thank you. Very quickly, we've got time for brief responses to a final question, if you will, panelists, which has come in from IQVIA's Salyaj Sharma. In rare diseases, there are small samples already. How can the AI model be trained to answer for virtual or synthetic patients? How can you validate the reliability of the responses there?
I can jump in there with this one because it's something we've been looking into. We don't have it all the way there yet, is the short answer. I'd love to be able to tell you, like in consumer, we can create synthetic respondents from scratch and build them because we have this amazing kind of ecosystem of information. It is something that is an unmet need, whether it's small to mid-sized markets, whether it's rare disease, whether it's target list recruitment. It's something where when we can't get samples, we do want to be able to boost or synthetically weight, as the word there you're using. I'm talking, by the way, about HCPs here. I realised just re-looking at your question, you were also talking about patients. We are seeing some good models come through for patients, and we ran a pilot ourselves recently. It does rely on a good, robust starting sample. So in terms of rare disease, again, we do have to have a decent starting point to upweight those synthetic patient samples to kind of that level that we want to do the sub-analysis, the characteristic deep dive, and so forth. So are there AI models today that answer this? I would say they're in their very early stage of development, but they're probably not where you would ideally want them to address that unmet need that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think I've only really seen one or two platforms, I'm sure there's more out there, that are starting to create, you know, you create personas based on the research that's being conducted, and you can talk to that data, you can, you know, build out those personas, but it's not, as to Kelly's point, we're not there yet. But definitely for rare diseases, you know, I think there was talk about rare disease synthetic patients at a conference last year, and we were all asked which one was the real patient, and we all got it wrong. So there is a richness of data coming from a synthetic respondent that is quite remarkable. And I think we're on our way there, but yeah, not there yet, but we will be there, I think, and it definitely has a place for rare disease, 100%.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone today on this webinar. We're going to close it down now, but I just want to go through the key takeaways from the discussion we've had in this webinar entitled Tracking Studies Get Smarter, AI Meets Human Intelligence. And those key takeaways have been that tracking must evolve to become faster, shorter, and predictive. AI and automation will increase agility and depth, and that the future of tracking is in real-time insights with humans guiding interpretation. If you are interested in learning more and want to get in touch, you'll find all the details on the final slide. Please contact today's speakers for more information or to discuss your next tracking study. And don't forget that the insights from today's webinar can also be found on our Blue Sky account, which is at pharmaforum.bsky.social, and the recording itself will be available on demand also. From Kelly, from Mo, from Tamara, i.e. from Konovo and Day One Strategy, and from Pharma Forum. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much.